The Patriots Beat podcast here on the CLNS Media Podcast Network and on Patriots Press Pass. I'm Evan Lazar, joined as always by Alex Barth. Today, the Q&A edition of the show on a Tuesday afternoon. We're going to break down some things that have happened around the NFL, happened around the Patriots or Patriots adjacent as well. So we'll start there. We'll get into some breakout candidates. Then we'll take your questions. So if you have questions, now's the time to drop them in the chat. We'll get to as many as we possibly can throughout the rest of the show. I do want to start, though, with the news that broke around the league today, and that was Terry McLaurin signing a 3-year, $71 million contract extension with the Washington Commanders. Alex, I think both of us maybe were, I don't know what the word is, dreaming a little bit, I guess, that maybe Terry McLaurin could end up in a Patriots uniform if he did have a falling out with Washington. That obviously isn't the case. There's really no reason to go on and on about that. The question that I want to present here is, do you see a world down the line for a McLaurin-level talent or somebody better than McLaurin that Bill Belichick would pay $23+ million for a wide receiver? Because that's the market, right? At least starting at 20. McLaurin's a really good one. Got a little bit of extra. Mike Williams signed that 3-year, $60 million deal. That's sort of the baseline of where the market is going. A guy like Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase, those two have to be looking at this market and thinking $30+ million a year by the time they're free agents. Do you ever see a world where Bill Belichick will pay a wide receiver that kind of money?
Not if he doesn't have to. I think some of the moves they made this offseason, right? You look at Devontae Parker trying to build a depth at that position, right?
Yeah.
And I think the idea is, they'd rather have 5 or 6 number 2s than that true number 1, and you spend the same amount of money. So I think he values depth more than top end talent at that position. Maybe if there's a guy he just really likes, he went out and traded for Randy Moss once, so I'm not going to totally rule it out. But I think unless the guy checks every single box for him, I think it's more going to be about depth at that position than getting that guy.
I guess we'll see if it works in this.
Or I guess let me add something to that. Whether it's Tyquan Thornton or next year, whoever, if you were to draft a guy that played up to that level, I could see him re-signing a player for that value. I think that if a wide, and I don't know if this is exactly the question you asked, but if a wide receiver is going to get a $20+ million year contract from the Patriots, I think it would be a guy they draft that pans out more so than a free agent or trading for a guy and then giving him a new contract.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think the biggest problem that the Patriots run into in their minds with a lot of these wide receiver deals is it's not to get Terry McLaurin out of Washington, to use him as an example. It's not just giving him the contract, because the Commanders aren't going to let him just walk for nothing, right? So they're probably going to go the franchise route. Then maybe he gets franchised next season. He hits the market in 2023 or 2024, let's say, and then he becomes a free agent. But in all likelihood, he gets traded before that point if they can't get to a long-term contract extension. So it's the Tyreek Hill model, right? It's trading 4 or 5 draft picks or a first and a second, like the Raiders did for Devontae Adams, and paying the guy $30 million a year, right? So I think that that's where the biggest hang-up is. The players that are worth that kind of money don't hit unrestricted free agency. I think next offseason, if Terry McLaurin was an unrestricted free agent and the Patriots could sign him without giving up anything, and they had all this cap space, then I think that they would offer him a market deal to come here and play football. But if you're going to have to give up the draft picks on top of it, that's a lot of capital, I think, that becomes invested into one player. And that's sort of where the buck stops. You mentioned having a bunch of number 2s. That is the zig, right? Everybody is zagging. They're all paying everybody up the wazoo to come catch passes. The zag or the zig for Bill Belichick is Devontae Parker, Kendrick Bourne, Jacoby Myers, paying tight ends, which are obviously a little bit of a cheaper market than paying wide receivers. You pay Hunter Henry and Johnny Smith top of the tight end market. Unfortunately, when you start to read some of the tea leaves of what the Patriots have done in the last 2 off seasons, it seems like they're zagging when everybody else is zigging. And instead of paying one wide receiver, like you said, $23 million a year, they're paying 3 wide receivers $23 million a year. We'll see if it ends up working. And I think ultimately, for it to work, Mac is the X factor, right? Like Mac needs to elevate number 2s and number 3s and make Jacoby Myers or make Kendrick Bourne a number 1 wide receiver statistically, because he elevates that to that status. We'll see if the Patriots have that luxury, because they had that luxury with Brady. They could roll out Brandon Lloyd and Brandon LaFell and Dante Stallworth, and I'm just pulling names down, not any slight on any of those players, but they could pull out those players, Chris Hogan, and Brady would make them look great. We'll see. We'll see if Mac Jones has that, and it can get to that level where he's taking that supporting cast with him. I will also say that they're trying, at least in the draft, right? Tyquan Thornton's a 50th overall pick. N'Keal Harry in the first round in 2019 hasn't hit yet, but maybe they do go, okay, well, we're not going to pay anybody $25 million a year, but if we can get a true number 1 with a top 50 draft pick and pay him on a rookie salary, that's a much different conversation.
Right.
All right. Let's talk about, did you listen to any of the clips or any of the excerpts that people posted from Julian Edelman on I Am Athlete? Because it was entertaining. I don't know if any of it actually matters, right? Like, I don't think any of it actually matters when we project forward for the Patriots, but it was entertaining none the least. The Jimmy G stuff, headline grabby, and that's fun. I don't think it has any relevance whatsoever from it being all the way back in 2016, but did you have any takeaways?
No. I can make it relevant. And this was my big take yesterday. It goes along with another report too. So the if you missed it, the thing from Edelman, it tied back to, was it late last year, right? Martellus Bennett was on the McCourty Brothers podcast and said something along the lines of, Jimmy Garoppolo, when Brady was suspended, tapped out of a game, and you can't win with a bitch as a quarterback, was his line, right?
Yeah.
And Edelman was asked about it, and I think his exact quote was, "I can understand why Marty would say that," and talked about Jimmy decided on Sunday he couldn't play, and it's one thing to take care of your body, but decide on Thursday, not Sunday, all of that.
Right.
You can't win with a bitch as your quarterback. And anybody who's watched this show knows my feelings on Jimmy Garoppolo. For all the talk about they had the next guy, I never believed that. I didn't love the draft pick. When we talked about, what he can do with San Francisco, I think he's a massive product of the system. Last offseason, when it looked like they were going to move him, people wanted to bring him back here. I was out on that. I think I remember listing 5 or 6 former Patriots quarterbacks I would rather have than Jimmy Garoppolo, Jacoby Brissett, Cam Newton. So the way I can tie it in is there was another report yesterday. It wasn't a report, but Jonnu Smith was on Good Morning Football and was asked about Mac Jones and said, among other things, he's got that dog in him.
Right.
Which is the antithesis, or not the antithesis, the exact opposite of what now 2 former teammates, and Edelman said there were others who felt this way, but what 2 former teammates have said publicly about Jimmy Garoppolo. And I know some people want to, compare Jimmy Garoppolo and Mac Jones' skill set. And I get that. Keep in mind, one's 23, 24, the other's 30.
Yeah.
So if 2 guys are the same skill level, but one guy's in his early 20s, the other guy's 30, those are 2 completely different quarterbacks. But that dog in you is a big part of playing the quarterback position in the NFL. And that was a big reason why I didn't want Jimmy Garoppolo back here. We had this argument, Evan. You said, is Jimmy Garoppolo better than quarterback X? And how many times did I say, well, I'd rather have quarterback X for 17 games than Jimmy Garoppolo for 10?
Right.
And, you kind of look at those reports yesterday. A year ago, we were debating those 2 guys. And this is exactly why I was saying at the time, it shouldn't have even been a debate.
Yeah, I do agree with you that Mac, at least so far, based off of what his teammates said and have said about him, but also just watching him play last year, especially early on in the season, there were times when that line was a little bit shaky in front of him and he took some serious damage, right? He took a lot of really big hits, had the knee brace on for basically the entire season, and really toughed it out, I think, in some aspects. I remember back in week 1 against the Dolphins, David Andrews coming and was really distraught about how many times Mac Jones was hit. I think he spoke the next day, or maybe it was right after the game, about how often Mac got hit and how the line take that personally. and Mac kept on getting up, right? He kept on getting up and he kept on gunslinging it down the field, and he kept them in that game. Is Jimmy G got that dog in him like Mac Jones does?
Nope.
Or at least
he doesn't have any.
Can we just say Mac Jones is perceived to so far, because the guy hasn't won a playoff game yet? Like, to sit here and say he's got all this dog in him, it's a little bit of it. We're a little bit premature.
It's not just winning in the playoffs, though. Like, that's not what that is.
He's got some puppy in him. Let's see if he grows up.
No. Because I don't think it has to do with winning in the playoffs. And also, like, he showed plenty of dog at Alabama in the postseason. Yeah. It's just about, like, I think it's like that no quit. Like, I don't think you need to be. I think there are elite quarterbacks that don't have dog in them. Aaron Rodgers, I think, or at least he doesn't in the playoffs. Yeah. I think that there's replacement level quarterbacks that have a ton of dog in them. Ryan Fitzpatrick, Taylor Heineke. I think it's a skill, but it's independent of overall skill, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's just what we're talking about. I think in a lot of ways, like a coach like Belichick would probably just chalk it up to mental toughness, right? That ability,
physical
ability to shake off things, to continue playing, to fight through pain, fight through adversity, and do what's best for the football team. It was very enlightening to hear how frank Julian Edelman was about his feelings about Jimmy Garoppolo.
Julian Edelman's got plenty of dog in him. No shortage there.
Oh, yeah. The last thing I'll say about this, I do think that this kind of puts to bed that Bill Belichick was ever banging the table to keep Jimmy Garoppolo over Tom Brady. You know, those were the reports, 2017, I want to say it was, that Belichick wanted to keep Garoppolo. And I think the report from Wickersham at the time was that Kraft or Brady kind of forced his hand to trade Jimmy G at a time when he didn't want to. And when you start to kind of read all these things and listen to all these things that people have said after the fact, and now that more information has come out, it makes that decision even more perplexing if Belichick really wanted to side with Jimmy G. Because here's a guy that comes into his office Sunday morning for a 1:00 gig against Buffalo and taps out, right? Says, I'm not playing. I have a shoulder issue. I'm not playing. In my non-throwing shoulder, by the way. Not playing. Baker Mayfield played with a non-throwing shoulder injury for half the season last year.
Baker Mayfield, plenty of dog.
Yeah. So Jimmy G taps out 2 hours before the game, makes Jacoby Brissett start with a torn thumb in his throwing hand, not his non-throwing thumb, his actual throwing hand thumb. The Patriots lose 16-0. They basically lost, one game the rest of the season.
Not basically, they did. It was the Seattle on the goal line.
Right. One game, they lose one game the rest of the year. Clearly, some of the guys like Edelman, who are uber competitive, still remember that and still hold it against them a little bit. And I think that you look back on that story and you say, they clearly had some concerns about his durability. I think there were certainly whispers in the building that they were really not in on Jimmy Garoppolo because of the durability concerns. He comes back the next training camp, by the way, and has an ankle injury during training camp that he nurses for a while during camp. And we're led to believe that Bill Belichick wanted to move on from the MVP of the league for a guy that they clearly had durability and just mental toughness concerns about. From everything that we know about Belichick, and at this point, there's so many stories written about him, but there's also firsthand accounts of, football life documentaries, 3 games to glories, whatever. What's the one that they've done recently with the more recent Super Bowls? I forget the name of it, but
America's Game.
They've done America's Game. There's one other one. It'll come to me in a second. That
Do your job.
Right. Where we see all of this behind the scenes stuff with Belichick. And I think we can finally put to bed any of those rumors that Belichick wanted to side with Jimmy G. That just sounds so outlandish based off of what Edelman had to say this week.
Your top 3 dog quarterbacks in the league right now. Quarterbacks with the most dog in them.
Number 1's got to be Brady. Right.
Yeah, of course.
I think Joe Burrow's up there at this point. I think he's got to be number 2. Or number 3. I think Stafford's got some dog in him. I think
Stafford's up there
in this run. I think that he finally got over that hump and had some dog in him, especially in this playoff run. I would say that those are.
Well, that even goes back to Remember the video of him? I don't know if it's his rookie year. It's early on where like he separates his shoulder and they call like late in the game against the Browns. They call timeout so he can come back in. I'll put Mahomes up there too.
Yeah, Mahomes got some dog.
He's put up with some crap. Bottom 3 dog quarterbacks.
Bottom 3. Ooh. Postseason Rodgers. I mean, that guy, he taps out. I mean, look at that game last year against San Francisco. That was a winnable game for them, right? I mean, they were right there against the 49ers. Should have beaten the 49ers. They were definitely the better team. And he taps out. I would guess Kirk Cousins is a good one just based off of prime time and showing up in big moments and that sort of thing. Not really, he's another one of those quarterbacks, not on, Rodgers obviously way better than Kirk Cousins, but he's another one of those guys that it puts up these video game numbers when they're playing at 1:00 and they're the third game on Fox and nobody watches them except on Red Zone, right? Like that's the guy he's the guy that puts up 4 touchdowns. That used to be Andy Dalton. Now it seems to be Kirk Cousins. I think the last one.
Well, Jimmy. I like there's 2 I think you haven't mentioned. Jimmy, I put down there. Kyler Murray might qualify for this. Tannehill's a good one. You're muted.
Yeah, I was going to say Kyler. I think the biggest thing with Kyler is that you look at, and this I think might actually be a durability thing, right? More than anything, but his numbers down the stretch, right? The last 6 to 8 games of the season, he just completely falls off a cliff. He puts up great numbers in September and October, which that's not when you win championships. So I think Matt Ryan's a decent one, but I actually think
Matt Ryan's shown some fight in his career.
I think Matt Ryan has some dog in him. He also has some choke in him as well. And that's not really his fault all the time.
All right, one more before we move on because it's June. Top 3 dog players of not of all time, of our lifetimes. Top 3 dog players of our lifetimes.
Top 3 dog.
I think number 1 is like a definitive answer too.
Is it? Let's see. Just like players in general.
Players, not just quarterbacks. Players.
I don't know if this is who you were thinking of, but in my top 3 would be Darrelle Revis. He's
really, he was a little soft at the end. No, I'm thinking I have a defensive back number 1, but it's not Revis. Better player than Revis too.
Ty Law?
No, he's not Patriot.
Who is it?
Patriot enemy for a long time. Seriously?
Yeah.
Ed Reed, man.
I guess I see what you're saying. I don't know if he's an enemy to me. I just respect Ed Reed.
Well, you like you know what I mean. Like he killed the Patriots for.
Yeah, I will say this though. I see in the chat Ray Lewis. Like I think that guy's fake dog. Like I think that guy is fake.
No, I don't know. No, would you say that to him? Would you say it to him?
Of course, I wouldn't say it to him, but I don't have to.
Then
say
I don't know.
Logan, I'll say it to him on camera. All right, I'm not gonna say it to him in an alleyway, but.
Logan Mankins was a good one in the chat.
Yeah, Jules was a good one too, honestly. I think
last
one.
Patriots of our lifetime. Who is it?
The biggest dog?
Yeah. I can think of 3 guys right off the bat.
Rodney.
I would say Rodney, Edelman, and Mankins are the top 3.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. That's a fun
Anyway, that was fun. That was fun.
Fun conversation for you.
James Harrison's a good one.
I think Darrelle Revis to me is I understand what you're saying in the 2014 run, maybe didn't finish it off the best way possible. But when he went up against a Randy Moss, Calvin Johnson, like when he went up against another dog, like that guy was shut down. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, but he couldn't. He was so offended the Patriots wouldn't give him a second contract. He sent his mom to go pick up his Super Bowl ring. Like, that's soft. Yeah, that's soft. Like, that disqualifies him to me. Great player, tremendous player. But again, it's not like directly tied to talent. Like somebody mentioned James Devlin, ton of dog. Not necessarily like you wouldn't rank him among the most talented players on those teams. Ton of dog in him.
Yeah. Sorry, Ray Lewis. I can't deal with Ray Lewis. That guy drives me nuts. I think he's a big hypocrite, and
I don't think so.
Early 2000s Ray Lewis, great player, right? Like 2000 Ravens defense, absolute dynamite linebacker, one of the best of all time in his prime. I think a lot of the stuff. I think what bothers me more about Ray Lewis is what his post-playing career, right? Like I think a lot of the stuff he said in the media, a lot of his act is, it just doesn't. It rubs me the wrong way. I don't know.
I just those say what you. I know the Patriots and the Ravens, like that's one of the Patriots' biggest rivals over the last 20 years. Say what you will about those teams. Those teams had fight in them. You couldn't put those teams down.
I'm not discrediting him as a
like
competitor.
not like
not the biggest friend.
Some of those Steelers teams the Patriots went through, I think, were soft. Some of those Colts teams were certainly soft. You would never say the Ravens were soft.
Oh no, I wasn't calling them soft. I just don't think that it's probably a little bit of fandom thing in me.
Okay. I said Ed Reed, and like I hated Ed Reed because he killed the Patriots. I love Ed Reed as a player. He's so much fun to watch. But yeah, I'd heard a little bit saying Ed Reed. Yeah. Ronnie Lott cut a finger off to play in the game. Yeah, Ronnie Lott might take this away.
Ronnie Lott is that's before most of the people in the
I know that's before also our lifetimes. But if we were gonna do all time, it's hard to say he's not number one.
All right, let's get to the breakout candidates, and then we'll funnel this into your questions. And I see a lot of the questions already in the chat. If you have more, then keep them coming, and we're going to get to a bunch of them here. Breakout candidates. So for the Patriots, I like this segment because I think one thing that I have a tough time with that I want to qualify before we get into this is what qualifies as a breakout candidate. Like, did Kendrick Bourne have his breakout candidate season last year? Right? Because even though he didn't get over 1,000 yards or something like that, he became a regular, right? He became a full-time player and somebody that was a big-time contributor. So in your mind, is a breakout candidate somebody that comes out of nowhere, or is it somebody that's on the cusp like a Kendrick Bourne and he goes from a 700-yard per year guy to a 1,100-yard guy?
I think it can be either. I think it's more how much they increase their production or their impact, right? So I think you can have a breakout guy who goes from being a rotational player to like a high-end starting caliber player. I think at the same time, it can be a starting caliber player who goes to be like a true impact player. I was going to say Kendrick Bourne, and kind of exactly what you just said. He was good last year. He was really good. I think he can be even better. I think he can be noticeably better. I think he can be a 1,000-yard guy. You threw out 1,100. I like that number for him. I'd say Kendrick Bourne was good. I figured we'd do offense, defense. Kendrick Bourne was going to be my guy on offense.
Yeah, so he just pulling up his numbers real quick. He had 55, 800 yards and 5 TDs last year. So you look at 14.5 yards per catch. You look at his numbers after the catch, too, with the ball in his hands. I think he talked about it a lot earlier on in the season, try to kind of downplay it as the season progressed. But his grasp of the playbook, I think, was a little bit of a work in progress for the first 6 to 8 weeks of the year. And that's why you saw him really break out in the second half of the season. If he can pick up where he left off, I think that he's a 1,000-yard guide for the Patriots if he gets that volume. That's going to be the key for him. He also, in this potential terminology, scheme change, whatever you want to call it, if it is more 49ers-esque, then he's the one that did that the most out of this group, right? He played for the San Francisco 49ers. So if it is more 49ers, Shanahan, McVay-esque, then I think Kendrick Bourne's going to really benefit from that. He's one of those guys that seems really jacked up about the terminology switch. It seems like the game is going to be faster for him. He already plays pretty fast, and now he won't have to think as much as he had to think last year. So I agree with you on Kendrick Bourne. The other offensive player I'll give you, just because I think that, we got to give one here. I think that they're going to try to make Johnny Smith work. And I understand that they've tried to make N'Keal Harry work, and they tried to make other guys work, right? They've tried to feed other guys, but
you put that big of an investment on a guy, you got to try to cash out.
Figure it out. I think that some of the things that they're doing to the offense, the phase out of the fullback, I think is going to end up turning into Johnny Smith being sort of a Swiss Army knife of a H-back, fullback type of player. I think we're going to see him in the backfield a lot. I think we're going to see him as a lead blocker or a lead receiver from a lead blocker alignment a lot. So I think that they're going to try some different things, get some unique scheme advantages with Johnny Smith. So I would have him in my breakout candidate list towards the top as well, along with Kendrick Bourne. I think some of the routes that they're going to run, if they're going to run some bootleg stuff, some of the slide or drag routes into the flat to allow him to use his yards after catch ability, I think all those things are going to feature Johnny Smith a lot. And I think that they're going to try to feed him the ball more this year. And they know that with the two guys that we just mentioned, Alex Bourne and Jonnu, the best athletes on offense with the football in their hands, right? Like the best guys after the catch on that offense. And I think those are the guys that they're going to go into the season with a plan to feature more than they did last year, knowing, okay, if we're going to get explosive plays, it's probably going to be from those two guys, at least until Tyquan Thornton really starts to catch on. So we like Kendrick Bourne and Jonnu Smith on offense. Let's turn over to defense. Are you going younger? Are you going older here? Because you can go in either direction, right? There's some veteran guys and there's some young guys with this one.
Yeah, I mean, let's see. I've talked a lot about Jack Jones. Barmore, the year 2 leap certainly on the table, but I'm going to pick up where I left off last year. I was like screaming, ranting and raving about how much Raekwon McMillan was going to help them.
Yeah.
Everybody was like, they had this massive free agency class. They signed him on like Friday of that week for like no money. What do you tell? Like people were really confused. And he had that great camp before he could prove me right, which he will. So I'm just going to get back on that. I think he's going to be a player. I think he's going to be a factor, assuming he stays healthy. I'm counting on big things from Raekwon McMillan.
Yeah, I like Raekwon McMillan too. Though I look at Kyle Duggar, and I think there's another level for Kyle Duggar. I just think he's so physically gifted that as he starts to download more information into the brain computer there, that the game's going to slow down for him even more and even more. And when you're that talented and that physically blessed, once the instincts and the game recognition kicks in, then your athleticism can truly take over. So I think that there's another gear for Kyle Duggar that I hope that he's going to find this year. I'm really high on him. I think he's got Pro Bowl potential if he can put it together. And you started to see last year, he had the 4 picks. He had some more impact plays in that season last year than he did his rookie season, got better at covering tight ends and man coverage last year as well. So I think that Kyle Duggar is a big one for me. The one that I won't fall for is Josh Uche. I'm not going to fall for Uche. We did this last training camp also, right? Uche looked great in the spring. He looked great at the beginning of the summer. He's one of those guys that I got to see it before I'm going to get on the bandwagon. I think Cameron McGrone was the other one when I threw this out on Twitter that other people were gravitating towards. Maybe a little bit early. I think we haven't actually seen anything from Cameron McGrone to consider him a true breakout candidate. But where do you stand on those two guys? Because I think those are two that a lot of people are popular answers for a lot of people.
Uche and McGrone?
Yes.
I think McGrone's going to be a factor. They need that coverage linebacker. I think between him and Mac Wilson, there's a spot to be won.
Yeah.
Uche, it's kind of the same thing. It's between him, Perkins, and Jennings. And I think I don't think he'll be like a breakthrough player. I think he'll be a solid rotational player. But I don't think that's what some people are expecting from him. I think they're expecting more. I think he'll be good enough, but I think he's going to fall a little short of expectations.
Yeah, I'm just concerned about Uche because we do this every single year with Uche. That's all. Let's see what happens with Uche. I like McGrone too. I think that he's going to have a role later on in the season. Talk to me on Thanksgiving for Cameron McGrone, right? I think that's
McGrone or McMillan?
Cameron McGrone. I think Raekwon McMillan's going to contribute right away. I think he's going to be a player as long as he can stay healthy, which unfortunately throughout his career has been difficult for him. But if he gets through training camp without any freakish injuries, he's injured himself twice covering kicks in training camp practice.
Yeah, there's a reason. And this is what I said last year. And this is part of the reason I like him so much. He's incredibly talented. There's a reason he's available when he was. It's not a talent thing.
Yeah, it's super bizarre. So he tore his ACL last year with the Patriots, right? And covering a kick or a punt or something like that in training camp. And a few years ago, he did the exact same thing and tore his other ACL covering a punt or a kick in Dolphins training camp. So really unlucky career so far for Raekwon McMillan. I agree with you that I think that he has the opportunity there and has the potential. All right, let's get to some of these questions. There was one I wanted to start with here. There it is. All right, we're scrolling. A lot of chat today. All right, Ramondre Stevenson, the running back situation. I think this is an interesting one heading into training camp. I got the question last week in the mailbag about if I could potentially see the Patriots treating Damian Harris's situation like they treated Sony Michel's situation, right? Which is you have Ramondre, let's say Pierre Strong or Kevin Harris, one of those guys pops in camp and in the preseason, they feel comfortable with him backing up Ramondre. But ultimately, it would have to mean that Ramondre Stevenson was overtaking Damian Harris for RB1, right, as the best running back on the roster. Could you see that path for Damian Harris that they get out of it a year before free agency and try to get something in return?
I'd be pretty surprised just because of his standing within the team. We know how much of a leader he is, his relationship with Mac Jones and all of that.
Yeah.
Kevin Harris is coming off a back injury. Like there's physical issues there with him. I think it's a little different than what the situation was last year. I also think that there's a chance they would re-sign Damian Harris. I know they don't re-sign running backs a ton.
Yeah.
If they were going to, Harris fits the profile of the kind of guy they might. So can Stevenson take over running back one? What running back one with the Patriots doesn't mean what people think it means. They split these guys about evenly. Running back one means the high impact snaps, 3rd and short, 4th quarter, running out the clock in a close game. They're going to play about the same amount of snaps. RB1 is who gets the high impact carries. And Harris's ball security has been better than Stevenson's historically. So that's what this comes down to. Who's the RB1? They're both going to play a ton. It's who's going to hold on to the ball better.
Yeah, I don't think that Damian Harris is going anywhere either. I feel like with Stoney, there was 2 things at play. One, he was worse than Damian Harris, right? Like, so he was losing out RB1 or whatever you want to call it, starting lead back role to Damian Harris. The second thing was, I don't think Stoney was bought all the way in. I never thought that he was in the best shape. I never thought that he was somebody that was fully committed to the Patriots program. Whereas with Damian Harris, it's the total opposite, right? That guy is all the way in New England, all the way in Boston in general, right?
Yeah.
I mean, out on the town, but Celtics games, Bruins games, Red Sox games. I think he loves being here. I think he's bought all in. I think he comes in impeccable shape, ready to go every single time that they report to the facility. So I think that he's a Patriot. I think that he's got it in his blood, probably from his Alabama days and kind of trickling that up to the pro level. So I think that they look at him as a very, very different case study as Sony Michel. To kind of spin this to Ramondre Stevenson, I actually think that Ramondre might outsnap Damian Harris in terms of percentages. I think that there is a way or a world where Ramondre takes on a lot of the pass catching duties in this season, because if James White isn't the guy, right? If James White starts as a year on PUP, if James White isn't the same James White that we knew before this injury, they're probably not going to give that mantle to Pierre Strong right away, right? He's going to have to earn that and probably go the rookie redshirt route. So I think Ramondre might end up out snapping Damian Harris just because he might play on 3rd down a little bit more than Damian Harris will. But I still think Damian Harris, like you said, 4th quarter, up a touchdown, need that big boy drive that we've seen the Patriots run so many times where they ice 8 minutes off the clock and finish with a field goal or a touchdown to secure the win. I still think that that's Damian Harris who gets the football in those situations.
Yeah, I would agree. So again, the whole RB1, you have to think in different. It's not like fantasy football. It's not like Madden where it's a depth chart.
Yeah,
it's more situational than that, which kind of you just touched on.
Okay, let's. I like this question. It's kind of related to the running backs. So when I was doing my first 53-man roster projection, Alex, you did one too right after minicamp. Ty Montgomery was the swing vote in a lot of ways, right? If a guy like Trey Nixon, for instance, is going to make this team, then it's hard to do it numbers wise if Ty Montgomery also makes the team, right? So,
well, yes and no. I think part of it is what position do they see Ty Montgomery as?
Sure.
Like, what if he makes it along with, like, so Trey Nixon's your 6th receiver, but what if they see it as, all right, Ramondre Stevenson, Damian Harris, maybe like James White's a guy they put on the IR, but like, what if they only keep 3 other running backs?
Yeah.
Like maybe Ty Montgomery's in the competition for that pass catching back role.
Definitely could be. Yeah. But I think that the problem is you start talking about just skill players in general, right? And getting Trey Nixon on the roster, I agree with you 100% that it is a little apples to oranges because they are different players and they're going to play different roles on the team. But I do think it becomes difficult when you just start to talk about the raw number, just the sheer number of skill players that they keep some of these wide receivers that I think a lot of people like Trey Nixon would like to see them keep around, and to keep both rookie running backs active, right? If let's say Kevin Harris ends up getting the Foxborough flu also, right? And they end up redshirting him, then it becomes a little bit easier. But the Patriots want to keep 9 or 10 offensive linemen. They're going to keep depth in the secondary, especially in that cornerback room, to make sure that they hedge their bets there, because nobody is really a true shutdown guy. So you're probably going to keep 6 or 7 corners, honestly, which is a big number. So I don't know. It gets difficult with Ty Montgomery. I agree with your role, though, that if he's going to stick on this team, I actually do think that he's going to be the third down back. I think they look at him exactly the same way that they looked at Brandon Bolden. I think that they think it's a 1-for-1 situation with Brandon Bolden. Play on in the kicking game, play on third down as the backup to James White in the receiving back role. He was good in that role with Green Bay. He played that role a little bit with New Orleans. I think that's really what they see with a guy like Ty Montgomery. He could return kickoffs too, which is something that Brandon Bolden did as well, just to have the safety net back there, right? It's not necessarily thinking that you're going to get anything explosive, but you're just not going to get any turnovers back there because you can rely on that guy to protect the football. So I think he's Brandon Bolden, which there's nothing wrong with that. They need Brandon Bolden, right? They needed him last year. So if Ty Montgomery is as good as Brandon Bolden was in an emergency break glass type of case, then look, that's a good signing. That's a good pickup by the Patriots.
Yeah. No, I'd agree with that.
Okay. I like this question because I think we've talked a lot about Mac, a lot about his improvements with arm strength and Tom House and all that kind of stuff. I actually have something different that I want to answer with this question, but what's the one thing that you would like to see Mac Jones improve on in year 2?
Well, I think we did this a couple weeks ago. And it's confidence. And that's not to say he wasn't confident in year 1, but I think that's just, something that comes with more experience in the NFL. And when I say confidence, he's obviously like sure of himself in terms of his ability to be an NFL quarterback, but from a snap to snap basis, testing some tighter windows, using maybe more of the field, more outside the numbers. And we saw him do some of the stuff in the spring. That for any quarterback, not just Mac Jones. I mean, that's what you look at from year 1 to year 2. How comfortable do they look in their own shoes from a play-to-play basis, and how comfortable are they to make certain plays that maybe they didn't need to make or didn't make at the college level that an NFL quarterback should be making. So that's the one for me. That's the big one for me. I don't know that we'll get the answer to that until like October, November. You got to play regular season games for that one, but that's the big one for me is just confidence.
So this is a little bit, like a minor detail in some ways, right? But I think the one thing that I was watching, Peyton Manning did a detail, that ESPN thing that he does where he breaks down film of quarterbacks. He did one on Mac Jones. I don't know if I saw it at the time and just we didn't talk about it or something, but it was posted on Reddit the other day, so I went back and watched it. The one thing that Peyton talked about in that with Mac was manipulating coverage with his eyes and holding the safety, right? Like he sometimes has that propensity. And we saw this with the Micah Hyde interception in the playoffs. And we talked about this a little bit on the show of staring down receivers, right? And kind of bringing the safety to where he's going to throw the football. There's one throw in minicamp. I don't know if it was on purpose. It could have been a total coincidence, but it seemed like he was emphasizing that a little bit more in minicamp, where he hit Trey Nixon on one of those deep corner routes, and he got to it late. But I think he was getting to it late on purpose because he was staring down the right side, knowing that he was going to come back left. The throw that Peyton Manning broke down, where he said that he would have liked to see Mac hold the safety a little bit longer, was actually one of the best plays of the year, was that Kendrick Bourne touchdown, right? The laser to Kendrick Bourne. Peyton seemed to feel if Mac looked off the safety a little bit longer, that maybe that doesn't become quite as difficult of a catch for the receiver at that point. I mentioned the Hyde interception. I think that if you look at some of the things that he did during his rookie season, sometimes had that propensity to give things away with his eyes. And I think that would really help him, especially as they try to unlock his deep ball. Even if you don't have the world's strongest arm, if you can hold that safety over the top for just that split second, it just gives you that little bit more margin of error to throw the football down the field. If he doesn't stare down Nelson Aguilar in the playoff game, does Micah Hyde get there? Right? If he's looking to his right and he's looking at the crossing pattern going across the field by Hunter Henry, and Micah Hyde attaches to that, then he's nowhere near in the play, right? So I think there's little things like that to his game. If you want to get into the details like Peyton did, which I thought was really good, that Mac could maybe do a little bit better in year 2. That's a little bit different than us just coming on here and saying, oh, I could throw the ball harder, or faster, or improve his velocity or whatever. I think that those are 2 little things that would really go a long way. Let's stick with offense. This is a good point by George here. Gary, excuse me, my bad. Talked a ton about Jonnu Smith right, in this 49ers-esque scheme. And we talked about the wide receivers. We haven't talked a lot about Hunter Henry just because he fit in so well in year one. It feels like he's just going to pick up where he left off. But how do you see him, if this is truly the way that they're going? I kind of look at it and see, in the 49ers offense, a lot of those little option routes are run by George Kittle, right? Like he's kind of runs a lot of those true options, like Y option, like just get open at the top of the route. In Los Angeles with the Rams, that's Cooper Kupp's role, right? It's his role to kind of get open on those option routes. I think that we could see a lot of the George Kittle route tree for Hunter Henry and some of those aspects, and that will help him if this is truly the way that they're going with the offense.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, for me, it's what is it going to look like to Shanahan's a lot of 11, right? Yeah. And are they going to do more, whatever you want to call it, 21-12 with Jonnu?
Right.
Are they going to swap in and out? If Jonnu's the guy, does that take opportunities away from Hunter Henry? That's where I wonder about it. I think within the context of the plays when he's on the field, they'll find ways for him to succeed. My question is, how often is he going to be on the field if they stick to like a true Shanahan 11 offense?
Yeah. It'd be interesting. Shanahan is right. Like you said, Kyle Juszczyk is a little bit like Jonnu in that, like, is it really a fullback? Is it a tight end? Right. Like where do you really put that? So Shanahan, there are a lot of 21 technically, but Juszczyk is his own thing. So it's kind of hard to label that personnel grouping. The Rams are a lot of 11. They're an 11-based team. That's how they roll. Right. They're like 85% 11. That's a big reason why they get away with playing so much 3 wide receivers, because Cooper Kupp is a fantastic blocker, right? Like he's an elite blocker out of the slot. So that allows them to be a little bit more 11 heavy than the 49ers. It'll be interesting to see what the Patriots truly call their base personnel. I assume it's going to look something like the Juszczyk role in the 49ers, kind of blurring those lines between 12 and 11 with Juszczyk. Sometimes he's in line, sometimes he's at the end of the line, sometimes he's in the backfield. I think that's going to be similar with Johnny, but I think Henry's role is going to be traditional Y, right? Like he's going to stick in the same role, which is kind of like the George Kittle in this situation. Obviously, I think Kittle's a better player, better after the catch, but that's sort of the idea that I think they're going to go with Hunter Henry. If they're going to go full Shanahan, right? If this is fully what they're going to do, then I think that's what we'll look at. There was a question earlier. I'll find it. We can start talking about it, about team captains, which I think is interesting. I mean, look, we're a long way away from naming team captains, but there's one guy in particular that I think is a lock to be a captain this year that wasn't a team captain last year. I'm sure David Andrews will be a captain again. And by the way, the lock I'm talking about is not Mac. I'm sure he'll be a captain too in his second season. But who do you see the Patriots giving out those captainships to this year?
So I think Andrews, McCourty, Slater, those are 3 locks. They were last year. James White, I think, gets it, even if he can't play.
Yeah.
And then Mac would be the 5th to me. And they generally have 5. Some years they have more, some years they have less, but those would be my 5.
Okay, so I don't know if they have 6 this year or if they find a way to get him in there some other way. I think Matthew Judon might be a captain.
No, if it's going to be a linebacker, I think it's going to be Bentley.
You think? Because that guy, the energy that he brings, though, is contagious, right? Like, it's a lot like Kendrick Bourne, who I don't know if Kendrick Bourne, I think is potentially one too. If Bill has anything to say about it, I don't know if Kendrick Bourne, the way that he talks to the media so openly, is going to get him a captainship.
Well, you could say the same about Judon.
I suppose. Look, last year we heard a lot about Judon, in the locker room, right? And how much of a joker he was, how fun he was to be around, working the music, right? He has the aux cord, all that kind of stuff. I don't know if he's necessarily like the guy the coaching staff wants Judon, would want, but I think there's going to be a lot of players that rally around a guy like Judon.
But you can rally around him. That guy's never the captain. I would also say too, and the players vote on it, but they vote on it, and Bill certainly has his say. Yeah. Judon wasn't at any of the optional spring practices.
That's true.
That's the kind of thing that, again, I think that they give it to, wasn't Juwan Bentley already a captain? I think he was in 2020.
Yes, he was in 2020.
When Hightower opted out, right? So I mean, so let's go off last year's group, right? Andrews, McCourty, Hightower, Slater, White.
Yeah.
Hightower's not here, so he's out. If you wanted, James White, because of the injury thing, if James White was fully healthy, he's a total lock. He's the ultimate, he's everything you want in a captain. That guy rules in terms of.
Damien Harris literally said he wants to be James White when he grows up. And he wasn't joking. He's half joking about the age thing, but he wasn't joking.
I want to be James White when I grow up. He seems like he's got it all together. He seems like a great guy.
Yeah.
So you look at last year, I mean, Andrews, McCourty, Slater, we agree those are locks. Hightower, I think there's also something to the, middle linebacker, green dot in the center of the defense.
Yeah, the Bruce Mayo, the Hightower.
Right. Yeah. That's Juwan Bentley now. So I would say if it's going to be a linebacker, it's going to be Juwan Bentley.
Yeah. Okay. I hear you. I don't know if he'll get it because maybe his attitude, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but it's the best way I can think of putting it. His attitude or his persona is not really captain material, right? Like Judon is
I think it totally is. Oh, Judon is not, or Bentley's not?
Yeah.
Oh, Judon. Okay. I think Bentley total captain in the way he handles himself.
But I don't know if Judon necessarily fits that box, but I bet you if you tally the votes in that locker room when they vote on it, I bet you Judon would qualify as a captain. Whether Bill actually gives him the C or not is a different story, but I think if you tally the votes, he ends up being the captain.
Well,
all right.
It kind of reminds me of Edelman. Edelman was never captain, right? No, and he kind of was that guy, but it just never happened. So I kind of look at it like that.
So I heard a rumor about Edelman not wanting to be a captain because of the media commitment of being a captain. I don't know if that's necessarily true or not, but that's sort of like the word on the street, right? Is that he turned it down a bunch of times because when you're a captain, you automatically have to talk to the media once a week, right? Like that's like a requirement as a team captain. You also, there's something that you have to wear with that. Like you have to, after wins, after losses, whether you're on a 6-game winning streak or a 6-game losing streak, you got to get up there and talk, right? When you got to see, that's sort of the way that it is in any sport. And I think Edelman would have been a captain if he really wanted to be. I think
fair enough.
Yeah. I don't even know if this is a question, but I guess we can pose it. It's a kicker question for you, so you can have some fun with this. Nick Folk versus Gostkowski versus Vinatieri.
No.
Let's just rank them though. Rank them in your top three.
It looks like we're doing in their prime, not career.
Yes.
Well, I think it would be the same either way. Adam Vinatieri is the greatest kicker in the history of the game. You can take your Justin Tucker and shove him. Adam Vinatieri is the greatest kicker in the history of the game. He has the single greatest kick in the history of the sport. I've had multiple kickers, people who have done this, tell me Vinatieri's game-tying kick in the Snow Bowl is the single, for a number of factors, is the single most difficult kick that's been attempted and hit. I don't know. Maybe somebody tried a 70-yard field goal once. I don't know. The most difficult field goal make in the history of the game. Gostkowski, the durability was unrivaled. I know people kind of remember him late in his career. He had I think it was a mental block ultimately where he struggled on extra points after they moved it back. But if you remember before they did that, and I know people think of, pre-moving back the extra point as those were gimmies. He had the longest streak in NFL history without missing an extra point. That's tremendous reliability. And I think it was a mental thing later in his career, but the reliability, the dependency, the consistency from Stephen Gostkowski. I know it wasn't great late, but for the majority of his career was excellent. Nick Folk's been really good the last couple of years. He really has. I think he's been a top 3 kicker in football the last 2 seasons. There's also a reason he was out of the league for a couple of years, and he struggled early on in his career. So if we're going to talk about prime, right? I mean, it's Adam Vinatieri over everybody. You can take Vinatieri.
This is really
Vinatieri, Justin Tucker, Jan Strudnin.
Yeah, and this is really about Gostkowski versus Folk for 2 and 3, right? Like this is not really a competition with Vinatieri.
If we're going to talk about their peak, it might be close because Folk's at his peak right now, and he's been excellent.
Yeah.
I don't know that he has the range Gostkowski did. Gostkowski was just as reliable, but he could hit from a little further out. But I would go, I guess, chronologically, Vinatieri, Gostkowski, Folk.
So I agree with you. I think I'd stick with that order. I will say this about Folk versus Gostkowski, though. If I have to make like a 47-yarder to win the game in a big moment, I'm taking Folk. I think that Folk.
I think that's recency bias.
maybe it's recency bias, but part of this bias, how many kicks did Gostkowski miss in Super Bowls? Like he definitely had some misses in Super Bowls, right?
That stat is misleading.
How's it misleading?
Because people say he's missed the most field goals in Super Bowl history. He also is like the third best field goal percentage in Super Bowl history. He just had more attempts than any kicker. Like kickers played in as many Super Bowls as he has.
Let me put you this way, Alex. If you had to recreate, let's say the Patriots in January are literally recreating the snowball kick, right?
Yeah.
And you could have Nick Folk teeing it up, or you could have Gostkowski teeing it up in your prime. You're still taking Gostkowski.
For 48 yards, you said?
40, the exact same kick.
Yeah, because Folk in his prime is right. Well, Folk attempted I don't want to say similar, but that kick in the rain against Brady was inclement to weather, bad weather, into the wind, all of that, and he didn't hit it. So
yeah, that's the one big kick he's missed since he came to the Patriots in terms of like game winner, game on the line.
But that's the kick you're asking me, would I put him out there for?
That's
fair. It's prime Gostkowski. I'm trying to stall here because I'm trying to find the kicker numbers from Gostkowski's prime.
All right. Look, I just think that he's big kick Nick, right? Like he has deserved that moniker over the last couple of seasons. He's made a ton of game winners. He made a ton of 50+ yard game winners. Granted, I think at least one of them, if maybe even two, are against the Jets. So I don't know how much you're really giving him credit. Not necessarily Folk. I mean, the kick went in, but you know what I'm trying to say. I think that there's an argument there that in a clutch moment that I might take Folk. I think over the course of the career.
So here's the thing. Change your question. Is it a 30-yard field goal? I might go Folk.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm talking about because I'm not talking about a chip shot. I'm talking about a 48+ yarder. Regardless of conditions, we're not in a dome, we're outside, but regardless of conditions, really, who are you lining up 3 seconds to go? 19-17, the kick wins the game. Who's taking it?
What was the yardage?
48+, like a long kick, right? Like whatever you want to put that at, 45+, 48+, whatever.
With that distance, I still think I'm going Gostkowski. And just so here's the number.
Thank you. Here we go.
So from 2008 to 2018, this isn't Gostkowski's entire career, but it's what I would call his prime. Third in the league in field goal percentage.
Oh, no, he was
Justin Tucker and Robbie Gould, 88.1%. Nick Folk also played for most of this window so here's a stat for you. So this is from 2008 to 2018 with at least 160 field goal attempts. So that's one attempt per game in that span. You want to know where Nick Folk ranks out of 27 kickers in that span in field goal percentage?
23rd.
27th. He's last.
Oh my goodness.
The Nick Folk we're seeing on the Patriots is like that's why it's so incredible what he's doing, because he's reinvented himself.
Coming out of nowhere. Yeah.
I'm trying to find like 50+ yard field goals. I can't.
Well, continue. Do you have the Super Bowl stat or no? Because then we're going to move on.
I told you what it is. He has more attempts than anybody else. It would make sense.
Okay, but how many field goals has Stephen Gostkowski missed in Super Bowls? Because it's definitely multiple.
All right, hang on. I gotta pull this up.
Putting you on the spot. Don't mess this up. This is your moment.
No, it is multiple, but he also has so many more attempts than any other kicker. You've got to go by the percentage.
Adam Vinatieri never missed a kick in the Super Bowl.
Well, okay, you're right. He's not as good as Adam Vinatieri. I said that. I think doesn't Tom Brady have the most interceptions thrown in Super Bowls?
I mean, I guess Tom Brady's way. Sure.
It's the same thing. What's Tom? No, he's the most interceptions in Super Bowls. He sucks in big games. It's the exact same thing you're saying, Evan. It's a volume thing. It's an anomaly because he's played in so many of those games.
I don't feel like it's the same thing for some reason, but I guess in reality, it pretty much is statistical.
Because it's a kicker versus a quarterback. Yeah. Gostkowski's played in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 Super Bowls. Crazy. I don't think there's another kicker that's played more than that. And he's missed 1, 2, 3 kicks in 6 Super Bowls. Sorry. 3 kicks in 6 Super Bowls.
That's crazy. Well,
dude sucks, man. He's horrible. That's rough. That's so rough, Evan.
Only on this show do we talk this much about the kickers, but the Patriots have had three really good kickers, right? So at least this version of Folk, obviously, has been really, really good. So
Nick Folk, that's kind of what I try to push with people with Nick Folk. That I think people don't understand. Oh, he's good. I get it. What's the big deal? He wasn't. He was an average to below average kicker for so long. And this is the other thing too with Cam Accord, right? Where people will talk about, well, what's Cam Accord doing? Cam and Joe Houston deserves credit for this too, who's the assistant special teams coach who has a background in kicking.
Yeah.
Credit to the Patriots kicking staff too, and to Nick Folk himself. I mean, it's night and day from the guy he was before he went out. And I'll say credit to the AAF. He figured it out there.
Oh my God. The World League, as Bill Belichick likes to call it. All right. Well, we'll end it there with a nice kicker debate. Always can come here to Patriots Beat for your kicker debates and your kicker talk and your punter talk. Let's do a 5-minute Boston Sports Minute here, Alex, before we sign off. Quickly on the Red Sox here. You're the one that told me to relax when they were hot, right? They won 7 in a row. Was it like 6 or 7 series in a row? And you told me about the teams that they were beating up on, and the Guardians are kind of a middling team at the end of the day that they swept over the weekend. And then they get, their doors blown off yesterday. 3 home runs by the Blue Jays, 7-2 loss to Toronto in Toronto. Was with a AAA pitcher that got called up in Seabold, but one of their better prospects, right, in the farm system. Do you think that the Red Sox are like you said to me the other day, the Red Sox are a good team that can beat bad teams, but they're not a good team that can beat good teams, right? Is that kind of where you're at with them?
Well, no, halfway. They're good enough to beat all the bad teams. They're not a bad team. They established that over the last 2 months. Yeah. Now, because they only played bad teams. I think the Cardinals were the best team they played in that stretch. The Cardinals they're fine. They're not good. They're not bad. Now they're going to play exclusively good teams for 2 months. It's just a weird schedule. So they came out of the gate slow. Happens. Sucks. Right?
Yeah.
Now they're playing good teams. So now it's like, all right, well, are you just good enough or are you actually good? I'm not going to write them off after one loss to Toronto. They can still win the series, right? But tonight's a huge game. Tonight is a massive, massive game. And we've talked about this stretch before. 6 of their next 7 are in the 6 of their next 7 series, not games. 6 of their next 7 series are all in the division. They've got to win 5 or 6 of those series. They've got to, I don't think they can afford to get swept even once. This is it. This is the season right here. If they falter through this stretch and they go 500 or worse through this stretch, we have our answer. They were a good team that beat up on bad teams but can't beat great teams. If they get through this stretch and they come out of this and, they've won 5 of these series and suddenly they're within shouting distance of the Yankees at the trade deadline, okay, you have my attention. Yeah. We have a season. Let's go. Let's start talking playoffs. So not a great start last night to a crucial stretch. Of course, it doesn't help that they're without some key pitchers because unvaccinated players can't go to Canada, but you got to come back and respond tonight. That's what, if the Red Sox are who Tyler Milliken is telling me they are, and Jared Carrabis is telling me they are, and all those people are, I love Tyler. Tyler's the best. If the Red Sox are who they're telling me they are, the Red Sox come out tonight, make a statement and win and get themselves right back on track. It's that simple. If they fall tonight and then they get swept by Toronto, it was a fun couple months of them beating up on bad teams, and we really start to count down to training camp.
So Chaim Bloom said the other day that they would look to add pitching right at the deadline. But do you think that when he said that he's going to pull that? Oh, well, we did add pitching. We added Chris Sale and Nate Eovaldi, right? Or do you think that they're actually buyers?
I think Bloom's above that. He's proved in the past he's above that. Yeah. I think this stretch here, these 7 series, it ends July 23rd or whatever it is. Yeah. So I think if they're buyers, they buy pitching. But if you whatever it is, 7 series, let's call it 21 games. I think it might be a little more than that, but let's say it's 3 games a series. If you go 7-14, you're not buying pitching. You're not buying anything. You're selling. If you go 14-7, you're all in buying. So I think in theory, I think if they go through this stretch and they have a real shot at it, I believe Chaim Bloom would invest in pitching and maybe an outfield bat. If they don't go through this stretch, I think you stand pat or you sell.
Yeah, I think you almost have to invest in the team because you don't know what Devers' future holds. You don't know what Bogarts' future holds. Like, this is kind of their window with this core potentially, right? So in a lot of ways, you kind of have to go for it. You sort of put yourself in a position. What Bogarts is a free agent at the end of this year, correct? And then Devers is not a free agent yet, but he's going to want a deal.
You would have to trade him. So basically, he has what the way do you know how baseball works with arbitration? I'll explain it if people watching don't know.
You don't have to go.
So baseball's contracts are
ridiculous.
It's ancient the way it's structured. It predates the modern free agency movement. You have 4 years where you basically just have to accept whatever offer the team gives you.
Right.
And then you have 3 years of arbitration, which is you can either agree to a contract. If you don't, the team can take you to arbitration. You don't become a free agent. Basically, you put in what you think you're worth. The team puts in what they think you're worth, and an independent arbitrator, somebody from the league, basically picks one of those numbers based on what they think is more fair. So next year would be Rafael Devers' last year of arbitration. The thing is, once that runs out, he's an unrestricted free agent. So if you could take him to arbitration and get the 1 more year, but after that, he becomes an unrestricted free agent. You lose him for nothing. Right. So you would take him to arbitration, get a 1-year deal that ultimately means nothing, and then trade him to a team that will give him a long-term deal.
Jeez. So this is it. The Red Sox have to, assuming that they don't completely play themselves out of it in these division series coming up, and in the rest of the series in Toronto, they got to go for it. Like this is their window. And JD's not getting any younger. Chris Sale's not getting any younger if he does come back and is a good pitcher for them again. So they got to do this. All right, let's turn to the Bruins here for a second. The Celtics, I think, are in a great spot, and we don't really need to limit.
Can I give you a hot take on the Celtics real quick?
You can.
I want Jay Crowder back. I think Jay Crowder's exactly what they need off the bench. There was a report out there today. I don't think you'd need to give up a ton to get him. Bring me Jay Crowder. I don't know that he's the only addition they need. I think they could also use a couple more fringe bench pieces, but I would take Jay Crowder back. I'd love that addition. All right, Bruins.
Yeah, I think that's a great addition for the Celtics would be Jay Crowder. I think to me, exactly what they need is a wing that can take some of the minutes load off of the Jays, right? This year, Grant is not that. Like Grant's a 4 or like a small ball 5. He's not a true wing. So the Jays had to play 40 minutes, 42 minutes, 43 minutes a night in this postseason run in big games, right? You get into late in these games because they don't have a Jay Crowder. So yeah, a guy like Jay Crowder would be absolutely perfect for them. Hey, I would love that move. The Bruins, Don Sweeney's extension gets done. We knew this was coming. I don't think there's been a move in Boston besides, granted, they did just trade Mookie Betts and let Tom Brady walk within like the last 3 years. So I guess that's a wrong way.
Devers is coming.
There hasn't been a move in management. I think we can say that, right? Where at the management level that has been as universally hated.
The entire Patriots coaching staff right now.
Yeah, I guess that's true, but I think that's below. That's like below this, right?
Front office.
Yeah, like GM, head coach, right?
Yeah.
So Don Sweeney's back. It certainly sounds like David Quinn's going to be the head coach of this team sooner or later. Like that announcement or report, at least, feels like it's going to come at any time. He coached Charlie McAvoy at BU, coached Charlie McAvoy on Team USA. Seems like he's really tight with McAvoy. It's kind of like the Bruins trying to get a guy like Ime, right? Who was really tight with the Jays from Team USA and Marcus and those guys. And now they're going to bring in the guy that's best friends with McAvoy. Okay, whatever. The Bruins, to me, are out of all the Boston sports teams, the furthest away and the biggest mess. Like I just don't know where the Bruins go from here to get back to contention. And I hate that Patrice Bergeron's probably going to come back, and it's probably going to be like his goodbye retirement tour, and they're going to be like an 8th seed again, right? I mean, that's sort of the way that it's trending. So how do you feel about the Sweeney extension, though? Are you as hot and bothered by it as everybody else is?
It was always going to happen. I guess I don't feel anything about it because that announcement was just a formality. I think you hit something on the head there with they're trying to find their Ime Udoka.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Whether it's David Quinn or Jay Leach or whoever it is.
Yeah.
And, they are in some ways in a similar spot to where the Celtics were at this time last year. A year ago today, they hired Will Hardy, and congrats to him on a well-deserved is that technically a promotion, whatever it is, the new head coach of the Utah Jazz?
It's definitely a promotion, yeah.
Is it a promotion if you go to another company? You didn't get promoted. You changed jobs.
I see what
you're saying. Semantics thing. You see what I'm saying? It's obviously he took a better job, but anyway, there's a number of reasons they won't find their Ime Udoka. One, Ime Udokas don't grow on trees. That guy's a tremendous talent. That dude is, I mean, the Celtics hit it out of the park with that one. They freaking nailed it. A++. If every team, if it was that easy to go find Ime Udoka, more than half of every league would fire their coach every offseason to go get him. Right. The other thing is it's just a different sport. You know, Ime Udoka unlocking Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown that's going to have more of an impact than Jay Leach, David Quinn, whoever it is, unlocking, let's say the comparables are Charlie McAvoy and David Pastrnak. Right?
Yeah.
Those guys are already pretty unlocked.
Right.
And you still have 2 more lines of forwards, or 2 more lines of defensemen, 3 more lines of forwards. It's not the same thing.
Right.
I think what they need to be doing with their coaching search, first and foremost, David Pastrnak doesn't have a long-term deal. Find the coach that's going to get him to sign an extension.
Yeah.
And if that guy's a bum, you get the extension signed, and then you change coaches again in 2 years.
Yeah.
Find the coach that David Pastrnak wants to play for.
Well, it sounds like
a Bruin for life.
Sounds like they're going more towards McAvoy, right? Like
McAvoy already has his deal. I don't care.
I know.
McAvoy signed his deal. Make David Pastrnak happy. It's like Mookie Betts or Rafael Devers. There's no excuse for him to be traded. And I'll tell you this, the way that these releases have come from these 2 teams recently.
Yeah.
Get ready for Devers and Pastrnak to get traded on the same day when that shoe inevitably falls.
No.
I'm kidding.
Stop, please. Don't do that to us. All right. So with the Bruins, I think the number one thing that I look at with them that makes them different from the Celtics is I don't think that their aging core players, like the Celtics have Al Horford, right? Like that's like kind of their vet, right?
Right.
I don't know if Patrice Bergeron, Marchand are those guys. Are those guys going to contribute as much to this team? I guess that Horford did.
Yeah, Patrice Bergeron was like a top 5 center in hockey last year.
Yeah,
Patrice Bergeron's still in the league player. David Krejci might come back too.
The more thing that I guess I'm coming from with Marchand is the injuries, right? Like Marchand, even if he comes back.
Well, Al Horford contributed tremendously, even though he was on a minutes restriction and didn't play back-to-backs for most of the regular season. He missed like 25 games.
Yeah, I guess I'm more just saying that they're not healthy, right? Like a lot of these guys aren't healthy.
Al Horford wasn't healthy though.
I guess let's take the Al Horford thing out of it. All right.
No, but that's the whole. No. You can't do that because that's the whole point you were just trying to make.
My point is that I worry about their health, right? I worry about the Bruins' health with their aging core.
That's
guy.
Fine.
I
don't think that makes them any less mentors or anything like that.
No, it doesn't. That was the wrong way of putting it. I have concerns about their health for their aging core guys that the Celtics I didn't feel the same way about. Right? Mainly, I would say.
I think you were too. Well, I would say you were too optimistic about the Celtics then.
I think mainly because I wasn't expecting anything from Al Horford. The Bruins are expecting things from Bergeron and Marchand, right?
I'm fine counting on Patrice Bergeron. I feel like if I count on him for a lot, he's going to deliver. He's been that player for 18 years.
Yeah.
I don't think you can start saying, I think the last thing you can start doing for the Bruins is saying, well, can we count on Patrice Bergeron? And that's the last thing anybody who watches the team should say.
It's not so much about counting on him. It's just, I don't know. They need more out of him than the Celtics needed out of Al Horford, though.
Okay,
right?
But he can give them. He was a top 5 center he was a top 5 center in hockey.
I don't know. I think you're missing my point.
If Al Horford had been a top 5 forward in the NBA in 2020, they need
Patrice Bergeron and Brad Marchand to be the guys that they were in like 2019. Are those guys? Are they those guys anymore?
Bergeron's been steady for the last 3-4 years. I mean, for the last 18 years.
I'm not. Marchand. I have nothing against Bergeron. I love the guy. I'll give you
Marchand coming off of double hip surgery. There is reason to be like, what's he going to look like? Patrice Bergeron's going to go out and give you what he's given you for the last 2 decades. I don't doubt that.
I hope you're right. All right. The last thing I'll say about the hockey team, I watched a little bit of the Avs Lightning series mainly to watch Tampa lose, right? So I watched Game 5. Disappointed they didn't lose in Game 5. But I watched Game 6 as well, third period at least. It looked like they were playing a different sport. And I hate that like notion most of the time, right? Like everybody ups their game once they're that close to the cup, right? That's how it works. But at the same time, the speed, the depth, the skill, I mean, it was those two teams were playing a different sport. Like they really were than what the Bruins were at the end of the year. That scares me too about the Bruins more than anything. Anything to do with health or anything to do with if those guys are aging or whatnot. Is I just don't know how you look at this team and see them competing with the product that the Lightning and the Avs were able to put out on the ice in the Stanley Cup final. Cal Maker is like honestly one of the better hockey players I've seen in a long time, not named Connor McDavid, right? Like that guy is unreal. And I just don't know if, him, McKinnon, obviously as well. That Avs team was really, really impressive. They lost I think 3 games the entire playoffs. I mean, that was a ridiculous run by the Avs. So credit to them. That was insane.
Yeah, so a couple things on that. I mean, every league has one or two of these teams now, right? Whether it's the Chiefs, whether it's the Warriors, whether it's the Avalanche, they're a video game. They're just built different, and it's, like you said, it looks like something else. The other thing I'd say about the Avalanche, as dominant as they looked, and sometimes people like to talk about these new agey teams and, look how much they respect the numbers. Colorado Avalanche, not a math team.
They're just
not a math team. They're just, they skate fast, they skate strong, and they get to the spot at the right time. That's what they do. It's just, let's get good athletes who are smart, and it'll work. And I know nowadays in order to succeed, you need a binder that's this thick, and you need pages and pages of spreadsheets, and you need the dorky math coach in Los Angeles.
You do realize that the first team, pretty much in professional sports, to have the spreadsheets and the dorky binders were the New England Patriots, right? Like,
but that's not mod. They talked about what that is. That's not the analytics I'm talking about.
But you do realize that the team that really discovered analytics and really
no. I'm not talking about those analytics. Bill and Ernie both talked about what that is.
They play at Gillette Stadium. The address is One Patriot Place. They're the godfathers of NFL of football analytics. Like you got to recognize.
So there's what they do, which I think makes some sense. They basically just look at historical percentages over time as tendencies, right? They
look at tendencies. I think that's the biggest difference. You have an issue with predictive analytics,
right? So here's what I would say: statistics mean nothing, averages mean nothing to the individual, right? Yeah, have you ever heard that before? Averages mean nothing to the individual. If you go, and Bill and Ernie understand that. It's as simple as trying to find tendencies. I'm talking about the Bill James analytics. I'm talking about, this is a line from The Simpsons, like Zach Greinke on the second Tuesday of a summer month pitching on the road after he's given up a hit is the best pitcher in baseball. That means nothing, right? Those kind of analytics, the Chargers analytics, those ones I hate. At the end of the day, and I know people want to build teams that way. At the end of the day, to me, there's still something to be said for go out and get good athletes who know the game and are motivated. And if you find guys who check those 3 boxes, you're probably going to have a pretty good team.
Okay.
I think the Avalanche proved that.
But I think so. I just to kind of hit this and wrap it up. You don't like predictive analytics, right? You don't like the model. You don't like, and I'm not talking about models. I'm talking about the model, right? Like you don't like the fact that
I got
it. Brandon Staley looks at his chart and he says, the nerds tell me to go for it on 4th down here. You don't want that. You hate that. But what I would rebut with is that a lot of analytics, especially in football, are actually what the Patriots call padding, which is where they go through film and they pad basically, make diagrams of every play that a team runs, right? And then what they do is they label it, they mark it as something, they flag it as something, and then they make a tendency chart of how many times they ran a play in a given game or in a given season or a given stretch of the season. So the Malcolm Butler interception in Super Bowl 9, is it? Yeah, 49 doesn't happen if Ernie Adams isn't in his dungeon with his fucking notepad and he's sitting down there and he's padding Seattle games and he recognizes when they're in this down and distance in this area of the goal line, they like to run this pick play. That was Patriots. Like that, we call them Ernie-lytics, right? Like that's Ernie. So I agree with you in a lot of ways that the predictive analytic models are broken because they don't take into account enough things. But what the Patriots are doing is analytic based. It's just a different approach to analytics.
Fair. When I say analytics, what I mean is, well, yeah, he only completed 54% of his passes, but his expected completion percentage is 68%. What does that mean? Like what? And I know you're going to tell me the formula or whatever. Like, no, I don't care what he was expected to do.
Yeah, he did what he did. It's BABIP, right?
No, BABIP. See, BABIP's a real tangible thing. Batting average on balls in play. Do you know what BABIP is? Batting average on balls in play.
What's the one that's like, his average like should be this, but it's this because of like bad luck and stuff
expected batting average. Anything that is expected in front of it, or like WAR, or like DVO. And look, DVOA, Aaron Chat, Sharon High School grad, shout out to him. But if you can't tell people what the formula is, my general rule of thumb is it's probably not a good formula. You're hiding something. BABIP, I like BABIP because batting average on balls in play, it's basically when the guy makes contact, does he make good contact? Does he make good contact that leads to hits? And that's a useful stat because you use it on guys who strike out a ton. And you say, okay, this Rafi Devers was a big BABIP guy. When he was hitting like 220 when he first came up, his BABIP was still through the roof. And basically because of that, the assessment was, well, if we can just teach him to strike out less and be more disciplined at the plate, he's going to become a better hitter. Like that, great. That's an awesome way to measure it. If you tell me, well, his expected batting average was this because the launch angle should have been this, and in this percentage of ballparks, if the weather is this ball falls here. No, too many variables at that point. With the sports are a large enough sample size where it all evens out. I don't want to hear about expected. I don't.
Yeah,
that's where it kills me. And then using it to evaluate players and bring in players is where my problem is.
That's fair. I think that's a big difference between. I think that's where like the lines get muddied because I think a lot of people like attack analytics and attack the nerds because of the expected stuff, right? Like the win probability models, all that. But really what analytics were birthed as, or what I was just talking about, right?
It's two. There was Bill and Ernie created their analytics in like the early 2000s.
Right.
But but that was when they were only in baseball. I'm talking about like the Bill James analytics.
Yeah.
Those I have no time for. Tendencies are great. I love tendencies. I think tendencies are a big part of sports. But blindly applying them and then adding random information to them that because you want to form your own argument. Like I think analytics are just people proving their own arguments with BS numbers, right? It's once you start applying the tendencies to things that aren't tangible, that's where you lose me. Yeah, that's where I lose it.
Yeah, it's really cool because I think a lot of NFL teams nowadays, they get handed packets from their analytics teams or their nerds or whatever you want to call it that have tendencies, right? That say, okay, here's the percentage of plays that they run every single run blocking scheme, right? Like the 49ers run outside zone this many times. The Patriots run power this many times. And they get handed these packets. This is how many times they run this coverage. This is how many times they run go routes. This is how many times they run, corners, crossers, whatever. That type of stuff is really, really useful. I'm with you though, that,
the math should inform the coaches. The coaches should not be the ones informing the math department.
Yeah.
Basically.
Fair enough. All right.
I'm all for having all the information at your disposal. Just know what you're doing with it.
Yeah. We've run really long.
We're a little over. That was a good discussion though.
Because we can definitely get lost.
I think that was as eye to eye as we've ever seen on the analytics debate, I think. So
yeah, because I'm with you on the predictive models because they don't take into account enough factors, right? Like what's the weather? What's the
it's impossible.
What's the game flow, right? Like what's all of these things, right? It's really difficult to be able to take those things all into account. All right.
How much dog in them? You can't measure that.
Right. Who's got heart, right? Miles and miles. That's the difference. Okay. Let's wrap this up. Alex and I are going to be back on Thursday. Another throwback Thursday. I think we should give it away to the people that have watched for an hour and 19 minutes.
All right, that's
I appreciate the 224 people that hung on with us here. We are going to break down Deion Branch on Thursday. Alex and I are really looking forward to this one. I think I don't want to speak for you, Alex, but one of my favorite and most like underrated Patriots, right? Like the run Didn't last very long for Deion Branch. We didn't play with the Patriots, at least the first time, for like 10, 20 years or something like that. But that season, that Super Bowl, obviously a fantastic game to break down. The game against the Steelers, also fantastic to break down. So we're going to break down Deion Branch in some big games on Thursday. We'll break in with any news or anything like that that's happening in the NFL world. And we are, less than a month in till training camp, basically to the day. We're 1 month until training camp. So once we get through some of the next couple of weeks after the 4th, things like that, we'll start doing training camp previews and start discussing what we're going to see out in Foxborough for training camp. So hang with us on Throwback Thursday. Until then, we're going to have some fun with it with Deion Branch, and training camp's right around the corner. So keep it right here for Patriots Beat, for all your Patriots coverage, and on Patriots Press Pass. But until then, signing off for Alex Barth, I'm Evan Lazar. Thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll see you Thursday.